The headlights cut a lonely path through the endless black of the Canadian wilderness. It was late, I was tired, and the last thing I saw in my rearview mirror wasn't human. It was tall, it was gaunt, and it was keeping pace with my car. A late-night drive through a remote forest becomes a nightmare that science can't explain. We're about to look into a viral Reddit story that might be a modern-day encounter with the legendary Wendigo. But is this just a well-crafted story designed to prey on our deepest fears? Or did something genuinely happen on that desolate stretch of road? The internet is full of stories, but among the memes and misinformation, there are accounts so visceral, so detailed, that they just grab your attention. Today, we're exploring one of those stories, a first-person narrative posted on Reddit detailing a terrifying encounter in the remote forests of northern Canada. The user who posted it has since deleted their account, leaving only the chilling testimony behind. We'll call him Leo. Leo's story isn't just another campfire tale. It taps into a legend that's ancient, powerful, and deeply rooted in the history of the land itself, the Wendigo. For the Algonquian-speaking peoples of the Great Lakes regions, the Wendigo isn't just a monster. It's the embodiment of winter, famine, and greed, a malevolent spirit that can possess a person, cursing them with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. It's a cautionary tale, a moral framework, and for some, a historical reality. We're going to journey through Leo's harrowing account, piece by piece. But we won't stop there. We'll pause, analyze, and put his experience into the broader context of folklore, historical records, and modern eyewitness reports. We'll separate the pop culture monster from the ancient spirit and ask the question that sits at the heart of this mystery. What did Leo really see on that dark Canadian highway? Leo's story begins like so many do, with a long, exhausting day of work finally ending. He was a contractor on a temporary job in a small, isolated town in northern Ontario, a region known for its dense, untamed boreal forests and sparse population. The job ran late, well past sunset, and he was now faced with a 4-hour drive back to his motel. The highway was just a single ribbon of asphalt slicing through millions of acres of pine and birch, a place where the tree line crowds the road and the darkness feels absolute. For the first hour, the drive was mundane. The drone of the engine, the familiar glow of the dashboard, and a classic rock station crackling on the radio were his only companions. But as he drove deeper into the wilderness, a sense of profound isolation started to creep in. He hadn't seen another car for over an hour. The radio signal dissolved into static, leaving a sudden, unnerving silence. It's a feeling many who've traveled through remote areas know well. The sudden, stark realization of how truly alone you are. The world shrinks to the twin beams of your headlights, and everything beyond them is an unknown, primordial darkness. This is when the feeling started, a prickling on the back of his neck, that classic, unshakable feeling of being watched. He chalked it up to being tired, to the hypnotic effect of the endless road. He rolled down the window, letting the crisp, cold air slap him awake. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, but underneath it, he wrote, there was another scent, faint, unpleasant, like spoiled meat. He quickly dismissed it as a dead animal on the roadside, a common enough sight. He rolled the window back up, and the silence of the cab amplified the low hum of the tires. He tried to shake off the unease, focusing on the road. But the feeling of being watched didn't just persist, it intensified. It felt as though eyes were tracking him from just beyond the reach of his high beams, moving in parallel with his car through the impenetrable wall of trees. The forest, which moments before had just been a backdrop, now felt alive and menacing. Every imagined snap of a twig, every shadow that flickered at the edge of his vision, became a source of growing dread. He was no longer just tired and alone. He was afraid. Let's pause the story here, because what Leo is describing is the foundation of countless horror stories, the power of an isolated setting. The deep woods are a primal source of fear for a reason. They represent a world outside of human control, a place where the rules of civilization don't apply. When you're miles from the nearest town, with no cell service and no one to call, you are completely vulnerable. This setting isn't just a trope, it's a direct tap into our evolutionary psychology. Our ancestors feared the predators lurking in the darkness beyond the campfire, and that fear is still coded into our DNA. Leo, alone in his car, is the modern version of that ancestor, his headlights a fragile campfire in a vast wilderness. But for this particular story, the setting is even more significant. Northern Ontario is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Cree peoples, among the very cultures from which the Wendigo legend originates. This isn't just a spooky backdrop, it is the monster's home turf. The stories describe the Wendigo as a spirit of these lonely, northern places, tied to the harshness of winter and the desperation of starvation. What's truly chilling is the history here. The region around northern Ontario and Manitoba was the site of some of the most infamous alleged Wendigo cases. This includes the story of Jack Fiddler, an Oji Cree chief and shaman who, in the early 1900s, was arrested by Canadian authorities for killing people he claimed were possessed by the Wendigo spirit. To his community, he wasn't a murderer but a protector, performing a necessary, terrible duty to stop the spread of a spiritual sickness. So, when Leo feels that he's being watched from those specific woods, his fear, whether he knows it or not, is echoing over a century of real-life belief and terror. He's driving through a landscape that is not just geographically isolated, but historically haunted. Returning to the story, Leo is gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles white. The feeling of being watched has become an oppressive weight. He's scanning the darkness on either side of the road, his heart hammering against his ribs. He tells himself it's just his mind playing tricks. He's about to turn the radio back on, to fill the silence with anything, even static, when something darts across the road, 100 feet ahead. It was a flash of movement, large and dark. A moose, he thought instantly. A massive bull moose on the highway is one of the most dangerous things a driver can encounter there. He slams on the brakes, the tires screeching on the cold asphalt. The car fishtails slightly and comes to a stop. He holds his breath, waiting for an impact that never comes. The road ahead is empty. Shaken, he peers into the darkness where the shape had vanished. He expects to see the hulking silhouette of a moose, but there's nothing. Did he imagine it? As his eyes adjust, he catches movement again, this time at the edge of the woods, right at the limit of his headlights. A figure is stepping out from between two large pine trees. And this is where Leo's story takes a dark turn. This was no animal. It was tall, unnaturally so, he writes. At least 7 or 8 feet. But the proportions were all wrong. It was horrifyingly gaunt, with limbs that were too long and slender for its height, as if a human skeleton had been stretched on a rack. Its skin, pale and gray in the wash of the headlights, looked tight and thin, stretched over a frame of prominent bones. It just stood there, motionless, its head slightly cocked. It was too far to make out distinct facial features, but he could see 2 dark sockets where eyes should be, and he had the distinct impression of a gaze filled with intense, malevolent hunger. It didn't move like a person or an animal. It was utterly still, a terrifying statue carved from a nightmare. A wave of pure, primal terror washed over Leo. Every rational explanation evaporated. This wasn't a person in a costume. It wasn't a bear or a moose. This was something else. Something ancient and wrong. Let's pause here again. The description Leo provides is critical. Gaunt, unnaturally tall, skin stretched tight over bone. This is remarkably consistent with the oldest folkloric descriptions of the Wendigo. Before pop culture got its hands on the legend, the Wendigo wasn't typically depicted with a deer skull for a head or covered in fur. Those elements are largely a modern invention, a result of cultural appropriation where antlers were used by non-native artists to mark the creature as a monstrous other, a symbol of wild nature. While writer Algernon Blackwood's influential 1910 story, The Wendigo, helped popularize it as a forest demon, the antlered look evolved over time through various media. The original Algonquian legends describe something far more human and arguably more terrifying. They spoke of a giant, emaciated figure, a skeletal being that was once human but had been transformed by cannibalism or a spiritual curse. It was a physical manifestation of starvation, eternally hungry and thus eternally thin. The more it ate, the larger it grew, but its hunger grew with it, so it could never be full. This gaunt, human-like form is exactly what Leo describes. His account aligns more closely with authentic folklore than with the antlered monster we see in movies and video games. Another detail, the foul smell he noticed earlier, is a frequent component in both historical and modern accounts, often described as the smell of decay or rotting flesh, a scent fitting for a creature associated with death and consumption. Skeptics might argue that at a distance, in the dark, a large animal like a starved moose or a bear with mange could be misidentified. A standing bear can reach impressive heights, and mange can give it a horrifying, skeletal look. This is plausible. However, it doesn't quite account for the specific details of the unnaturally long limbs or the intense feeling of malevolent intelligence that witnesses like Leo consistently report. And as we'll see, it especially doesn't account for what happened next. Back on that lonely highway, Leo is frozen in his driver's seat, staring at the impossible figure. His mind is screaming one word, over and over, drive. With a surge of adrenaline, he stomps on the accelerator. The engine roars, and the tires spin for a second before catching. The car lurches forward, and he doesn't dare take his eyes off the road. He speeds past the spot where the creature was standing, his gaze locked straight ahead. For a few heart-pounding seconds, there's only the sound of his engine and his own ragged breathing. He thinks he's clear. He thinks it's over. And then, he makes the mistake of glancing in his rearview mirror. It's there. The figure is no longer at the edge of the woods. It's on the road, running behind him. But it isn't running like a human. It's moving with a terrifying, jerky gait, its long limbs pumping in a way that seems to defy physics. And it is fast, horrifyingly fast. It's keeping pace with his car. He floors it. 60 miles per hour, 70, 80. The speedometer needle climbs, but the gaunt figure in his mirror doesn't shrink. It stays right there, a pale, loping horror maintaining the same distance, its shadowy form illuminated by his red taillights. He describes its head bobbing with an unnatural rhythm, its long arms swinging like pendulums. He can't see its eyes, but he can feel them boring into the back of his head. This is the absolute peak of terror. The desperate struggle for survival against something that should not exist. He wrenches his eyes from the mirror, forcing himself to focus on the winding road. A single mistake would send him careening into the trees, right into its domain. The chase goes on for what feels like an eternity, but was likely only a minute or two. Every instinct is telling him he's being hunted. Then, up ahead, he sees it. A faint glow on the horizon. The lights of a small town. Hope surges through him. He pushes the car faster, the engine whining in protest. He dares one last look in the mirror. For a split second, the figure is still there, a persistent nightmare. Then, as if it knows it has lost, it abruptly veers off the road and vanishes back into the impenetrable blackness of the forest. Just like that, it's gone. Leo doesn't slow down until he's in the sterile, fluorescent lights of a gas station on the outskirts of town. He pulls in, kills the engine, and just sits there, shaking uncontrollably. The image of the running thing burned into his mind. Leo's story ends there, but the questions are just beginning. What do we make of an account like this? The skeptical position is understandable. It could have been a hallucination from extreme fatigue. The mind can play powerful tricks, especially when we're tired and in an eerie, isolated place. The chase sequence could be a distortion of perception, a stationary object in the rearview mirror appearing to keep pace due to pure terror. Or the entire story could be a work of fiction, expertly crafted to go viral. But let's entertain the idea that Leo's account is genuine, that he really did see something inexplicable. This is where the story connects to a deeply disturbing history. Let's talk about a Plains Cree trapper named Swift Runner. In the winter of 1878, in what is now Alberta, Canada, Swift Runner, who was known in his community and had even worked as a guide for the Northwest Mounted Police, committed an unthinkable act. During a period of starvation, he murdered and consumed his wife and 5 of his children. What makes his case so haunting is that it happened while he was about 25 miles from a Hudson's Bay Company supply post. He wasn't completely without hope. He later confessed, claiming a Wendigo spirit had possessed him. Swift Runner was tried, found guilty, and in 1879, he was executed. This is where the term Wendigo psychosis entered the language of Western law, a recognized culturally specific condition where people are overcome with the delusion that they are turning into a cannibalistic monster. These weren't just myths, they were real events, interpreted through a cultural lens that saw the Wendigo as a genuine force. The historical Wendigo was an internal threat, a spiritual sickness, a manifestation of greed and desperation that turned people against their own. Modern encounters, like Leo's, have shifted this. The Wendigo is now often seen as an external threat, a physical cryptid to be spotted and escaped. It has more in common with Bigfoot than with the possession spirit of old. Leo's story sits uncomfortably between these two worlds. He witnessed a physical creature, but one that seemed to embody the same malevolent spirit from the ancient legends. So what was chasing Leo's car? A starved animal? A trick of the mind? A well-told lie? Or was it a glimpse of something else? Something that has haunted the northern forests for centuries, a creature born from hunger, isolation, and the darkest parts of the human spirit. The legend of the Wendigo endures not just because it's a scary monster story, but because it's a powerful symbol. It represents the thin line between human and monster, and the terrifying idea that under the right circumstances, of hunger, of greed, of desperation, any one of us could cross it. What do you think happened on that lonely Canadian road? Was it a close call with the impossible, or a trick of a tired mind? Leave your theories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you have a strange or unexplainable story you think needs to be told, you can find my submission links in the description. Don't forget to subscribe for more explorations into the unknown. Thanks for watching, and try not to think about what might be waiting just beyond the headlights.